Let me show you my shirt. So we need a lot more humble pie. But yeah, I like to discuss and go through long lines with humble pie. Uh, while we're in Iran right now, and we have the largest, most expensive military in the world, and we don't have it. We don't have it for no reason. We have it for a reason. We have we have to use it. We have to. It's just like you have cops. They have to arrest people, whether they want to or not. They have to arrest people. You have jails that need to be full. You have correctional officers that need to work, and it's a whole system that needs to happen. Now, whatever reason they give you for arresting you or uh, starting a war, it's usually all bull, and it doesn't work for everybody because, they're not starting a war in Yemen, they're not starting a war in other places. I mean, at the moment, they probably eventually will. I mean, we started the war in Iraq and we didn't start it in Iran at the time. You know, we get around to it. It's like they didn't arrest every crack dealer on the corner, they arrested him. And the other 20, they'll get to him eventually, you know. So you have a lot of that going on. And, look, they tried to put the military in Washington, D.C., Minnesota, L.A. They tried to put them in U.S. states and for what they called the policing action. They wanted to bring security back to these regions. Now, in Washington D.C., as an example, they put the National Guard in the rich neighborhoods. They didn't put them in the poor neighborhoods where the crime actually happens. They put them in the rich neighborhoods, and I mean, yeah, there's crime in rich neighborhoods as well. But when they put them there, of course, the crime rate went down, and that was the headline in the paper. Crime rate went down. They didn't say where it went down. They just said the crime rate went down in the rich neighborhood. And why'd it go down? Because you had all these National Guard guys standing on the corner, and yeah. But the crime rate didn't go down in the bad neighborhoods. They stayed the same, if not got worse, because all the crime that was going to happen in the rich neighborhood now happens in the poor neighborhood where the National Guard aren't. But anyway, that's not my point. The point is they got a lot of pushback for putting those soldiers in United States territory. So when we go to Iran, or when we went to Iraq, there really isn't any pushback. You people are you're subdued into accepting it. You think it's not in my control. I have no choice where they put the army and where they put the soldiers or what they do. And to a great extent, you don't. But you don't riot in the streets. I mean, some people riot in the streets, marched in the streets because of Iran, but it has no effect. And basically, if Iran didn't affect oil prices and the gas that you pump in your car and everything you buy at the supermarket, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't care about Iran. Iraq didn't really affect gas prices. Iraq didn't affect what you paid for in your supermarket and stuff, and you didn't care. Nobody cared about Iraq. The government did because it was a way to use that multi-trillion-dollar army and give them something to do. You can't have the army just sitting around waiting for somebody to attack us. And when you have the biggest army in the world and the most powerful, nobody's going to attack us. So basically, we have them for no reason. But that doesn't help you pass the trillion-dollar budget every year that you need to keep the facade and the illusion going that we need this, And like I said, the military complex is just it's astronomical. I can't even cover 1% of what it covers and how it affects our lives on a daily basis and how much of your taxes. They don't go for school lunches for your student at school who needs help because they're poor. It goes to the missile maker in Arizona who puts together a Stinger missile. He gets all the tax money, and your student in Arizona starves to death and uh, doesn't learn well because they don't have a proper nutrition in their gut, and we don't care about that, because the missile is more important. Because it's not just an Arizona person putting together a missile. Utah and Minnesota and Nevada, they all make the switches and the little parts that go into that Stinger missile. So it's not a matter of one missile or one manufacturer. There's hundreds and hundreds of, not thousands and thousands of manufacturers. It's like a tank. When you make a tank, how many parts come from all different parts of the world to make that tank? And that's the military complex that I'm talking about. And if you have hundreds of thousands of troops hanging out, you got to use them, and it doesn't hurt. It does, but it doesn't hurt in the sense that, like, we're getting Iran to take a knee and bow before us. And Trump is the ultimate king, and Iran will bow before the king. Or in this case, the Don, and Iran will kiss the ring. So that's what it's all about. And why not? For Don, it's like, why not? you know, but it hurts us in the long run. It hurts us in the long run because the world hates us. And I don't think they're afraid of us. They respect us in the sense that they know the power we hold, but doesn't mean they're powerless. Iran can do it like they did with the Strait. They have a lot of power as well, and they're affecting gas prices. They're affecting our lives in their own little way, and nothing we can do about it. I mean, he's trying, blockading and all that stuff, but for how long? You can have the military, the Navy there doing the Strait of Hormuz, but for how long? It's going to cost trillions of dollars to keep the Navy there, and at what cost? So when you kick a beehive, the bees go crazy, and that's what we did. But the difference between Biden and Trump is Biden was a decentralized government. He let the states do things, and that's why the border got a little out of control with people crossing the border. And Trump is a centralized government. He's the king. Everything goes through him. If you don't listen to him, you're fired, like Pam Bondi and the other retard. But it's just he's the boss. He's the don, and it's a centralized government, and nobody makes a decision without passing it through him. And that's the way he runs his government. Where Biden didn't do that, and that's your real big difference between the two. And people got mad because their needs they didn't feel like the price of eggs and stuff with Biden. And Biden would just let the market control eggs and stuff. And Trump didn't bring down the price of eggs. The price of eggs are extraordinarily high. But he promised to. He lied, but he promised to. And that helped them. Because he doesn't care about lying to you, He's telling you we're in Iran because they were going to have a nuclear bomb. And they weren't. He went into Iran because um, Israel has blackmail stuff on him, and they control him. And Israel is really running the war, not us and not Trump. It's Netanyahu's that running the war, and Putin has stuff on Trump, and that's why we haven't seen peace in Ukraine, because Putin doesn't want peace in Ukraine, because Putin has another military complex within Russia. Russia is built on wars and conflicts. 10 years in Afghanistan, and they've lost. They went home with their tail between their legs, because they lost the popular vote. They lost the will of the people in Afghanistan. And they're going to lose the will of the people in Ukraine as well. So, and with, I don't think Trump ever had the will of the people when it came to Iran. So that's not going to be a long-lived war. But again, it's mostly these countries, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, they're all desert. There's a lot of desert, and there's a lot of places to blow up bombs and really not hurt anybody. You can drop a bomb and maybe you kill a handful of people, but not like you're dropping one of those bombs in the middle of Manhattan where you would kill millions of people. It's a big difference. And, they need to blow up bombs so they can make new bombs, and the people in Arizona that put Stinger missiles together have a job. And that's the whole system, and you're not free, and you never will be free as long as this military complex exists. As long as there's money to be made at war, then there's never not going to be war. They people make money off of victims. That's why the 9/11 victims, it's how many years since 9/11, and they're still talking about 9/11 victims, because money's made off of them. Whether they're real victims or not, the perception is they are, and somebody's making money because they're paying for that commercial. That commercial costs money, so there's a reason to pay that money, to pay that commercial, because they're making money. Whether it's a law firm or a doctor or something, they're making money off of 9/11 victims. They're riding the back like a parasite on 9/11 victims and making money. Now they do it like the parasite. They act like they're helping their victims, and they do to an extent until they don't need them anymore. They discard them and end their lives. So it's just the victim is a money maker, and Israel's a victim. The United States is a victim to Iran, and it's all BS. There's no victims, and you need to think there's a victim, so you are pacified. It's another pacifier in your mouth to keep you quiet about what they're doing. It's the magician. Watch this hand. This is the hand you want to watch, and we're going to do this with this hand, and you're not going to watch. And that's what they do, and that's what they keep doing. So, it's like that stop and frisk was a big thing in New York. And it didn't help. They would just go up to black guys and frisk them. They had no probable cause. They had no reason to do it, but they were black, so they frisked them for a gun or weapons or other weapons and drugs and whatever. And if they found something, they arrested them. And it went away. They say they renamed it. They didn't get rid of it. It's not called stop and frisk anymore. That's the only thing they did. But people were pacified. They had another pacifier in their mouth because the cops said, we're getting the bad people, the ones with guns and drugs off the street. So let us do what we want. And that's what they want. They want to be able to do what they want. You say nothing about it. We go to Iran and you say nothing about it. The Congress has said nothing about Iran. The Supreme Court puts a rubber stamp on a lot of the things Trump does. And, it's just pacifiers. It's all pacifiers. And that's what you all are, is a bunch of babies. You're a bunch of babies. You never grew up because they didn't let you grow up. It's like the 20-year-old, the 40-year-old guy that lives in the mother's basement. He never grew up because mom and dad didn't want him to grow up, because mom and dad needed a slave. They needed someone to cut the lawn. They needed someone to go shopping for them. And that's why they kept you in the basement. And if you stop doing those things, you're going to find yourself out on the street. So you're not free, even though you might think you are, but you're not. And you live in a communist country, whether you want to believe it or not. And communism is supposed to be about the people, but this communism government is about the government, which is what happens in Russia. And I think China is more for the people, um, but Russia and the United States are more for the government. Because China doesn't live off a military complex. I mean, they're starting to go into it, where they're building weapons and stuff, but they don't live off war. China's not in war anywhere in the world, but Russia and the United States are, and they live off that military complex. So that's the big difference between the two. They tell you live in a capitalist and democrat and free country, and you don't. You don't. It's all illusionary. It's all BS. It's all pacifier. It's just a pacifier in your mouth.